The letter was brief, 2 pages stamped with the royal crest, delivered by hand in an unmarked envelope. It arrived not in a grand palace, but at an ordinary gated estate nestled in the quiet hills of Montecito. Prince Harry held it with shaking fingers, his eyes darting over each word like they might rearrange themselves into something softer. They didn't. The message was clear. An official royal inquiry had been opened. Not a press distraction, not a private warning, but a formal investigation launched by King Charles III into Harry and Meghan's public actions, statements, and possible violations of royal protocol. For the first time in modern history, a reigning monarch had sanctioned a formal review of members of his own bloodline. Meghan stood across from him, silent. She didn't ask to read the letter. She didn't need to. The air between them was already dense with something heavier than shock. It was inevitability. Just days before, King Charles had stood before a quiet panel in a private chamber at Clarence House, flanked by senior advisors, legal counsel, and his most trusted aide, Lord Alcott. "Enough," Charles had said, voice calm but final. "They've crossed the line." No one questioned him. This wasn't a decision made in haste. It had been years in the making. Years of scandals, headlines, whisper campaigns, and public jabs from the couple who had once been hailed as the modern breath of fresh air the monarchy so desperately needed. Charles had watched in silence as the institution his mother had spent 7 decades fortifying was dragged through fires of accusation, racism, greed, hierarchy, emotional cruelty. He had endured documentaries, interviews, best-selling books and podcast appearances filled with indirect slander and unapologetic critique. And through it all, he had remained still, until now. Because this time, it wasn't just personal, it was structural. Harry and Meghan had crossed into territory the crown could no longer ignore. Not after Meghan's recent remarks questioning the royal lineage, not after the public insinuations about Archie's skin color had re-emerged in new global syndication. Not after the whispers, fueled by anonymous sources, claimed the couple had knowledge of financial irregularities inside the palace. This wasn't an image crisis. It was an existential threat to the monarchy. Back in Montecito, Harry poured himself a glass of water with trembling hands. "They're investigating us," he said aloud, more to himself than to Meghan. "We are the threat they fear most," she replied, her tone sharp but calm. Harry looked up. "You don't seem surprised." "I'm not. He never could tolerate disobedience, especially not from his own blood." Harry clenched his jaw. "He's doing this as king, not as a father." "Maybe he never stopped being one long enough to become the other," she said, turning away. Outside, the California sun scorched the garden, but inside the house the walls felt frozen. In the UK, palace aides scrambled to prepare for the media storm. Charles had insisted the inquiry remain quiet, but nothing involving Harry and Meghan stayed hidden for long. Leaks would come, narratives would spin, and the court of public opinion would light its torches the moment the scent of royal conflict hit the air. What made this unprecedented wasn't just who was being investigated, it was what they were being investigated for. The inquiry would review Meghan's public accusations of racism within the family, Harry's claims regarding security withdrawal and personal danger, alleged misuse of titles in commercial deals, comments questioning the legitimacy of royal bloodlines, financial arrangements post-Megxit, and potential breaches of confidential protocols. Each accusation was more than a soundbite. Each was a crack in the facade of the crown, and Charles knew, if even one of them went unaddressed, the entire institution could become a house of cards. Lord Alcott had warned him, "If you pursue this, there's no going back." "I'm not trying to go back," Charles replied. "I'm trying to stop them from burning everything behind them." The public didn't know it yet, but by the time the sun rose over Windsor the next morning, the first batch of confidential files had already been transferred to the Royal Archives under the classification Sovereign Oversight. This was no longer about family. It was a war for control of the crown's story, and it had just begun. The press found out faster than the palace expected. By dawn, the Times, the Telegraph, and the Guardian all carried the same whispered confirmation. King Charles had launched a formal investigation into Harry and Meghan. No names were officially released, but the language was unmistakable. Senior royals, suspected breaches, royal lineage concerns. It didn't take long for the world to connect the dots. Meghan woke to her phone, buzzing uncontrollably. Texts, missed calls, media requests. She stared at the screen expressionless, then calmly set it down. She walked to the mirror, wrapped a silk robe around her, and looked herself in the eye. "They're making it official," she muttered. "Good." Within the hour, she was seated before a team of lawyers, PR advisors, and her longtime communications strategist, Angela Torres. The Montecito living room had transformed into a war room. Angela opened with a warning. "If you strike now, we control the story. If you wait, they'll bury you under protocol and silence." Meghan nodded. "We don't wait." The statement was drafted within the next hour. It read, "The Duke and Duchess of Sussex have become aware of a formal investigation launched by the British monarchy into their actions and public disclosures. We categorically reject the insinuation that speaking one's truth, particularly regarding racism, institutional pressure, or family dynamics, constitutes misconduct. We stand by every word we've said, and we will not be silenced by intimidation masked as accountability." Angela added a headline-friendly line to the end. "Silence is the system's favorite defense. We will not play along." In Clarence House, King Charles read the statement before his aides could finish printing it. He lowered the paper slowly, his eyes unreadable. "They never miss a performance, do they?" he said, quietly. Lord Alcott stepped forward. "Shall we respond, Your Majesty?" Charles gave a bitter smile. "No, let the public see who rushes to the stage when no one's called for a curtain." Meanwhile, the divide between the brothers grew sharper. William had kept his distance since the Queen's funeral. He rarely spoke of Harry, and when he did, it was with restrained sorrow, not anger. But this time, William sent a message. Not through the press, not through advisors, directly to Harry. A single-line text. "You're choosing her over the family again." Harry didn't reply. He stared at the words for a long time, then locked the phone and threw it across the room. It hit the wall, bounced onto the floor, and shattered the silence in a way nothing else had that morning. The British public was sharply divided. Social media ignited into firestorms of hashtags. "Protect Meghan," "Not my king," "Crown under fire," "Truth or treason." Piers Morgan roared. Tabloids speculated. Royalists defended Charles, while liberal voices in the U.S. painted Meghan as a truth-teller being persecuted. But beneath the noise, something deeper stirred. For the first time, the monarchy was on trial in the court of modern morality, with race, truth, and tradition colliding in a spectacle more explosive than any royal divorce or scandal in memory. Angela pushed Meghan toward a high-profile interview, pre-recorded, tightly controlled, and timed to drop before the palace could finalize their inquiry details. "This isn't about revenge," Meghan said in the recording, composed but firm. "It's about refusing to be erased." She didn't name names. She didn't have to. The headlines wrote themselves. Charles watched the interview from his study, alone. His tea went cold on the table beside him. The camera showed Meghan looking regal, wounded, and resilient. "She's good," he muttered. "Too good." But beneath the calm of his expression was something cold and ancient, something that had governed kings for centuries. He picked up a fresh folder placed before him by a royal archivist. On the cover, Lineage Records, 27. The folder was old-world formal, bound in royal blue leather with gold trim and stamped with the royal seal. Inside lay the documents no monarch ever wanted to see challenged. Certified birth records, baptismal registries, succession charts, and private notes from the Royal College of Heralds. King Charles flipped through the pages slowly, his fingers trembling just enough to betray the weight of what he was holding. This wasn't just about scandal anymore. It was about lineage. The question had first surfaced in whispers, offhand remarks by fringe columnists, speculative blog posts buried beneath louder controversies. But then came the Netflix docuseries, then the memoir, then the interviews. Each time Harry or Meghan spoke, the undertone grew louder. Was the royal family hiding something about Archie and Lilibet's standing? Now, within the sealed documents Charles held, were discrepancies, irregularities in how certain forms were submitted, inconsistencies in timelines, even references to titles that had been used prematurely or without official warrant. "Why wasn't this caught earlier?" Charles asked, his voice hardening. His senior aide, Sir John Hatherley, hesitated. "Out of respect, sir, after their departure, few wanted to audit the trail too closely." "Respect," Charles repeated bitterly. "And now look where that's brought us." Meanwhile, in California, Meghan sensed something shifting. Her legal advisor had just gotten off a call with a source close to the palace. "They're not just going after your public statements anymore," she was told. "They're opening the vault. Birth records, titles, even succession protocol." Meghan went still. "They're trying to erase my children," she whispered. Her tone wasn't angry. It was lethal. Across the Atlantic, Prince William met privately with 2 royal counselors and a constitutional expert. "If the line of succession becomes a point of contention," the expert said cautiously, "we risk public trust in the very idea of monarchy." William pinched the bridge of his nose. "They've made this about blood now," he muttered. "They always do," the counselor replied, "because that's the one thing the monarchy can't afford to get wrong." The tabloids didn't need official confirmation. A leaked document, no one could say from where, surfaced online. A scanned copy of a royal birth registration form with a faint stamp dated 3 days earlier than publicly reported. The image went viral. Soon, news anchors were asking the unthinkable on live television. Is the royal bloodline secure? Could Archie and Lilibet be removed from the line of succession? Has the palace been covering this up from the start? The questions were corrosive, not because they had definitive answers, but because they didn't. Uncertainty, in a monarchy, is poison. In Montecito, Meghan held her children closer than usual that night. She didn't say much. She didn't need to. The fear wasn't for herself anymore. It was for them. "They'll try to shame us out of history," she said to Harry. Harry's face was pale. "They won't win." She looked at him. "They already are." Back in London, Charles sat alone with the records still open before him. He whispered a phrase no king had said aloud in centuries. "What if the crown is compromised from within?" And at that moment, he understood the stakes. This wasn't about control. It was about survival, not just of his reign, but of the monarchy itself. The room at Windsor was silent save for the faint ticking of an antique clock. King Charles stood facing the portrait of Queen Elizabeth II, her gaze eternal, steady, immovable. Beneath her oil-painted eyes, he felt both the weight of legacy and the burn of betrayal. She had handed him the crown with a quiet expectation. Preserve the institution at all costs. Now, those costs were rising faster than he had ever anticipated. The preliminary findings of the royal inquiry were grim. Public trust had slipped. The monarchy's neutrality was being questioned on racial and political grounds. Worse, there were now serious legal concerns about the use of royal titles in commercial ventures. Deals Meghan and Harry had struck with streaming giants, publishers, and luxury brands. A confidential clause in the royal constitution, one rarely invoked, surfaced among the legal advisors. It granted the monarch emergency authority to suspend titles under conditions of reputational threat to the crown. Charles read it 3 times before setting it down. He didn't want to use it. But the pressure was mounting, from within and without. In Montecito, Meghan was preparing for a second televised interview. This one wouldn't be calm. She sat before the camera in a deep crimson blouse, her makeup sharp, her eyes colder than ever. The idea that my children could be stripped of their names because they were born to me is not just cruelty. It's colonized thinking wrapped in a crown, she said. They want to write us out of history because we told the truth. The clip dropped within the hour. It exploded across continents. The public reaction split the UK in two. One half called it the defiant voice of a woman standing against an archaic institution. The other half called it treason masked in martyrdom. In Parliament, whispers grew. How long can the monarchy remain untouchable? Should royal powers be reevaluated? For the first time in decades, even traditional monarchists began to quietly question the line between sovereignty and spectacle. Prince William requested a private audience with his father. The meeting lasted only 15 minutes. William emerged, grim-faced. When asked by a reporter if he supported the investigation into his brother, he simply replied, "I support what's necessary." That line, clipped and cold, was enough to confirm everything. The brothers were now standing on opposite sides of the crown. Inside the palace, the phrase no one wanted to speak had now been said behind closed doors. Title revocation. A formal document was drafted, a contingency order removing the Duke and Duchess of Sussex titles pending further outcome of the inquiry. It would not be enacted yet, but it now existed. The monarchy had drawn its line in the sand. She sat on the patio with Harry late into the night, the flicker of garden lanterns dancing in their silence. "If they take our names," Harry said slowly, "what's left?" Meghan's answer came quickly. "Our story." He looked at her. "What if no one believes it anymore?" Her eyes didn't flinch. "Then we make them." Back in London, Charles signed a sealed letter addressed to the Privy Council. It wasn't the final move, but it was a move that would change everything, for better or for the end. The storm didn't come with thunder. It came with a press release. No crest, no signature. Just 5 words, issued by Buckingham Palace at precisely 9 a.m. Titles under formal Crown review. No denial, no specifics, no names, but the world knew exactly who they meant. Within 20 minutes, Meghan's name trended across 5 countries, in some as a victim, in others as a villain. Harry's name followed, but less defiantly, less heroically, more lost. The narrative had turned. They weren't just critics anymore. They were being cast as exiles. In Windsor, King Charles stood at the window watching the clouds roll in. His advisors tried to brief him on the next step. He silenced them with a single raised hand. "I've done what I must," he said. Lord Alcott hesitated. "And if they go to war?" "They already did," Charles replied. "We simply stopped pretending we weren't under attack." Back in California, Meghan prepared a written response. No more interviews, no more cameras. This would be crafted, curated, and irreversible. The act of stripping identity is colonialism in modern form. Our family has been the target of relentless smears, institutional resistance, and quiet cruelty masquerading as tradition. If our titles are taken, so be it. But our truth stands taller than the palace walls built to contain it. It ended with one line. "You may erase a title, but you cannot silence a legacy." Harry read it over her shoulder, then signed his name at the bottom. At the palace, the response wasn't anger. It was calculation. Sir John Hatherley closed the red folder labeled Sussex Inquiry, Final Stage, and said calmly, "There's no winning with them, only surviving them." Charles nodded. "Then let us survive with dignity." He handed the document to the Privy Council liaison. Title review would proceed quietly, legally. No fanfare. Just a slow, silent uncoupling of 2 names from the institution they once vowed to modernize. Meanwhile, a final blow landed. The Times published an investigative piece citing discrepancies in Meghan and Harry's commercial contracts, suggesting that royal titles were indeed used to secure international deals, contradicting their own public statements. Suddenly, public sympathy began to split. Even their supporters began asking, did they use the monarchy to escape it? It wasn't betrayal that undid public trust. It was inconsistency. In the quiet that followed, Harry sat alone in their garden. Not angry, not bitter, just tired. He scrolled through old photos, his wedding, his grandmother's funeral, his children playing in the sand, and paused on one. It was the day Archie was christened, in Windsor. A day of smiles, a day of peace, a day now so far gone it felt fictional. Meghan stepped beside him, placing a hand on his shoulder. He didn't look up. We started a war, he said quietly, and I'm not sure we ever knew what we were fighting. She was quiet for a moment. Then, not a war, a reckoning. And in Buckingham Palace, Charles closed the folder for good. The wall had held, but the cracks would remain, etched into the foundation of a family, an institution, and a country still unsure whether truth and tradition could ever truly coexist.